Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Despite global capital market volatility and uncertainty and which way the prevailing interest rate winds are blowing, underlying business and development seems to be flying in the face of all those challenges and expansively just chugging along. Welcome again to the longest running and most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and what will this fall bring? Where are we headed? We will peer into the near term with Louis Gossett of the South Carolina Manufacturers Trade Group and Robert Preville from equipment rental aggregator out of Wilmington. And later on, Pair Olof Loof from Kemet, who has been making capacitors in South Carolina's upstate for many years now. He joins us again.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Robert Preville, CEO of KWIPPED, Louis Gossett, President and CEO of the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance, and special guest, Per Olof Loof, CEO of Kemet Electronics Corporation. And now, here's Chris William.
Welcome to our program. Robert, good to have you on the program. Louis, welcome back.
Thank you.
You get the first pitch here, Louis, for better or for worse. Louis, workforce development has been this challenge that runs kind of like a program on a computer, runs in the background. That workforce development has been a challenge, trying to find, especially high-tech manufacturers, low-tech manufacturers for that reason, trying to find the right specialists in the jobs, and it seems like it's hard to find. Is that still as critical of an issue as it was even 12 months ago?
I'd say arguably it's the most critical issue in manufacturing and will continue to be so as long as you and I are thinking and talking about this. It is arguably the Manufacturers Alliance in South Carolina our biggest priority. We are being very aggressive in terms of not only supporting and advocating for and being involved in the development of the workforce training programs. South Carolina has an infrastructure that can train a worker as well as anybody in the country. What my organization is focusing on with public-private partnerships is getting the kids and their parents to understand the value of a manufacturing job, the opportunities that exist, and to show them what modern manufacturing is and how you get there from here. Mm-hmm. And that involves a skill set that is really a little bit mind-blowing these days. They need a very high level of skills to work on production lines at virtually any facility you can think of in South Carolina.
Robert, this is not fair to say it this way, but you're cobbling together a bunch of specialists down along the North Carolina coast in Wilmington. How do you, and you certainly got you got a great incubator, UNCW down there, it produces some great folks, but I mean, how do you congeal a good group of specialists and technologists like you need? Do you define it the same way Louis does? Is this a critical issue? Is this your number one issue?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what is different now than 30, 40, 50 years ago is that technical talent chooses where they want to live first, then they figure out what they're going to do when they get there. So I think building the community, Wilmington's been very focused on what can we do to attract talent to want to live here and raise a family here. So I think that is very important for any community that wants to incubate that kind of talent.
Okay, so Louis, so you got Wilmington trying to build their mojo around this. Arguably, Asheville has done it in a couple different ways with microbrewery and even technology. Raleigh, Durham. So how do you make, Boeing with some of the high-tech manufacturing going there, is this really the cool factor? Is that how you get the talent that you're needed?
Well, what you've got to show, and we've learned this, if you look at the evolution of the South Carolina economy, when people left the fields to go to the plants, they didn't want their kids to go back to the fields. When they left the plants to go into college and graduate school and white-collar jobs, they didn't want their kids to go back to the plants. Things have changed now. We've got clean, safe, high-tech operations that require a great deal of skill, that do have a significant amount of status, and importantly, and this is where you make it cool, wages and benefits. The average wage in South Carolina is about $37,000. The average manufacturing wage in South Carolina is approaching $55,000. So it is great, stable employment, and the manufacturing sector is growing in South Carolina, plenty of opportunities. That's what you've got to make sure that the kids, but just as important, their parents understand, because you don't want guidance counselors getting that call like they get saying, did you tell my kid not to go to college? Because college is not necessarily the path to those jobs. Yeah. Now for that Boeing IT and engineering center, yeah, we need as many engineering graduates as we can get our hands on, as many IT people as we can get our hands on. So
Robert, do you define cool the same way that Lewis does?
Well, I think cool is different for everybody. What a person likes, what what their lifestyle is going to be, what things are attracted to is going to be different for various things. I think what the challenge is with finding top technical talent is how do you cultivate that talent at a young age? The athletic establishment recruits skill sets at a very young age and then cultivates that skill sets. High school kids, sometimes even middle school kids. How do we cultivate brain power in the same way that we cultivate muscle power? And what role does government play in that process?
Jimmy Williamson from the South Carolina Technical College System, and I know you know Jimmy, Dr. Williamson pretty well, and they will say that they're the place for that apprenticeship type of program along with the manufacturers. But let's take it in a different. So, and I ask you both this question: how do you work in the face of? And again, this is not going to say it really well, but how do you work in the face that a four-year college, whether it's an engineering college or liberal arts college or some type of MBA or MFA, how does it fly in the face of getting a college degree has become even more elitism now than it was before? So, Lewis, how do you sell against that? How do you say that the apprenticeship program is important, but also four-year colleges might not be as relevant as they were?
Well, they're relevant if you're looking for the right degree. I heard a presidential candidate recently say that, we haven't needed a Greek philosopher in 2,000 years. And so if we're producing those, maybe we're not talking about what the job market is saying we've got to offer you. I think that what you have to look at is that the pathway, 46% of kids nationwide, if I remember my statistics correctly, that enter into four-year schools are getting degrees. 46%, 54 are not. The average loan is between $30,000 and $40,000. Student loan burden is between $30,000 and $40,000 now. You can go into these technical colleges that Jimmy is responsible for, and you can emerge with very little, if any, debt, with a career that will put you in that $55,000 to $100,000 range before your peers who are getting out of college graduate. That is a pathway that people need to understand, and the jobs are out there. We are in a position, Chris, where we can say South Carolina's got jobs. That's a nice place to be.
Yeah. Robert, how do you come down?
I don't think a four-year degree is obsolete. You had Dr. Cobain on your show not long ago, and he spoke to what he believes is probably the most misunderstood component of getting that degree, and that is just developing socially and building social capital, and because these people that the technical talent, ultimately they're going to navigate a career path that puts them in charge of a larger labor force, and that skill set needs, how do you develop that skill set? And I think a four-year college degree plays a very critical role in the development of that.
Yeah. All right. We got about 30 seconds left. Lewis, does the headwind of a stronger dollar, have you heard any of your members in the Manufacturing Association complaining about that at all? Is that becoming an issue?
Well, not complaining. It's starting to, certainly be on their radar screen, just like the weaker dollar played a role in their ability to be more aggressive and be more successful in their export businesses. But the one thing that I've heard lately is China's ability to buy. and regardless of where the dollar is, China's ability to buy, and how strong or weak are they right now, and that will have some impact on manufacturing.
Guys, stay with us. We're going to bring our guest on in just a second, talk to him about some of these issues as well. Coming up on our program in the next few weeks, it has been a controversial debate in North Carolina about whether the state, the General Assembly, the structure, if you will, is funding education at a rate that is arguably successful or not. We will talk to John Fennebresque. He is the chairman of the UNC Board of Governors and has been a bit of a lightning rod around controversy. John Fennebresque will be on the program. Also, Janet Cowell, the treasurer for North Carolina now in her second or third term, will be a guest on our program. And then the newly minted president of Furman University, Dr. Elizabeth Davis, will join us as well. It is and has been arguably one of the most ubiquitous and pervasive electronic components in just about every high-tech product and application imaginable for many years, many decades now. It is the lowly capacitor, and I say that with respect. Someone has to make it, and Simpsonville, South Carolina-based Kemet has been doing that successfully for years now. Joining us again is Kemet's Chief Executive Officer, Per Olof Loof. Per, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You look rested and healthy, so that must mean that sales are good, right?
Sales are decent. I think we're going through an interesting patch in our industry. It used to be feast or famine, very cyclical.
Yeah.
And now we're finding a very stable environment, which is sort of interesting. So we used to manage through this feast and famine kind of situation. Now we're managing a more stable environment. And I'm trying to figure out why that is, but that's sort of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
I kind of like stable. It's sort of, you can plan longer, and I think maybe our industry is becoming a little smarter once and for all.
Well, as a publicly traded company, Wall Street likes stability.
They like stability, yeah.
You know, we've seen a lot of volatility in global capital markets. We've seen a increasingly strong dollar, which is not necessarily good for U.S.-based manufacturers, and I know you manufacture everywhere on the globe, but does a stronger dollar make it harder to grow your top line?
It does, of course. We have 35% of our businesses in Euroland. And of course, if the euro goes from 140 to 110, 5 and 10 to maybe now 115, that has an impact on the top line. And of course, since we do have a little bit of a margin, when the top line, we lose top line, we lose bottom line too. So when you put it all together, we get some benefits from on the cost side, of course, with the euro being where it is and where the peso in Mexico being where it is. But it is every penny on the euro is about $500,000 of bottom line effect that we have to figure out to rectify something.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you and I promise I'm going to give you a chance to jump in here, just to follow this thread a little bit further, Per. Outside of the fact, the clinical nature of how you just described the euro and versus the American dollar and how it affects your top line growth, is there something else when you see this volatility or this uncertainty that goes on globally in the financial markets? Is there something to this where you say, yeah, but what I'm really worried about is X?
I'm more worried about the development in China on the actual economy rather than on the currency side. Is it going to be, how is the purchasing situation going to look like for the Chinese people going forward? And we have a lot of activity in China, a lot of operations in China. Most of it goes into products that eventually end up over here. But over the years, I've been to China maybe 50 times. I've been manufacturing in China since the mid-90s. The mid-90s was interesting. It was more for show than for real, actually, if you want an honest answer. But I worry about, the growth in China, how that will affect all of our products that we eventually make.
Mm-hmm. Louis?
Per, you're a guy that I got a lot of questions for, but based in certainly on your comments. But one thing with that I think is very important to think about from the perspective of a manufacturer who's got operations all over. What about South Carolina, and what about South Carolina is attractive to you in terms of the manufacturing you've done there and hope to continue to do there? And what is it about South Carolina that hopefully gives you optimism that you can continue to operate in Simpsonville as you have?
We used to have a lot of manufacturing in the Carolinas, not just in South Carolina, but also in North Carolina. Most of that has moved to other parts of the world. What still remains here is the most complex the most critical, for our nation, most critical activity, military in particular, medical devices, for components that go into these sort of activities, we still manufacture here. So the manufacturing here in South Carolina now is much more focused on these much more difficult and complex systems than we would do otherwise.
Yeah, and let me just follow up on that. Excuse me just a second, Robert. So is that because low-cost provider, or is it a national security issue?
It is a national security issue, and also when it comes to the implantable devices, things you put in your body. That's important that it works. So our customers require us to make it here.
Yeah, okay. Robert, thank you. Sorry.
To piggyback on that question, a lot of the discussion I've been part of in Wilmington, North Carolina, has been economic development and how do we attract companies like Kemet to come to Wilmington. What's important to a company like Kemet in identifying a location? Is it the labor? Is it the lifestyle? Or is it incentives? What factors do you think manufacturers are looking for to identify where they should set up operations?
I think when it comes to our Simpsonville operations, the fact that we've been working with the Clemson University for a long time, that has helped feed us with great talent. So we need to find engineering talent somehow. For instance, we recently put a plant in Macedonia, in Skopje, actually. And the reason we put it there was we thought we did a lot of study on the university systems in Macedonia and found that we had great talent in that place at a reasonable price. So, talent, capability is a huge factor when it comes to where you put things. The reason why we worry about moving into the internal China, we are in Eastern China, is because we don't really we worry about the talent pool that we're going to be able to access in those parts. Because we're basically a chemical company, is what we are. And we need chemists. And we need good chemists. And we need them to be part of the operation. And you want to have engineering close to the manufacturing facility, because a lot of it is not just the formula behind what we do, but also the process kind of goes together. So having that in one place is actually very important.
Mr. Gossett.
How about the ability of a state to support research and in fact to not only engage in research within the research universities, and South Carolina's got several, but also to partner with you in terms of research that you would like to conduct to further your goals? How important is that? That
is very important. A lot of the things we do in conjunction with Clemson, for instance, and also with the University of Pennsylvania, as a for instance, and we continue to do that. And we do the same in Italy with Bologna University. We have a big operation in Bologna. We do that in Germany. We do that even in China. So I think the importance of being close to a university that we can partner with in terms of research is very important. So I think there's a lot that the state and government can do to help that process.
I'd like to actually dig into that. If we talk about educating, recruiting, and then retaining our workforce, which one of those areas do you think is more important for the state to be involved with?
Interestingly enough, it's been in South Carolina, it's been more difficult to find them than to retain them. I kind of think it's that once they get into the walls, the secret sauce of Kemet kind of attracts them to make them stay. But I mean, it's really finding the capable people and having them come. In other parts of the world, the scene is different. In China, the issue is to retain them, because there's so many, used to be at least, so many opportunities elsewhere. Maybe the slowing down of the economy in China maybe will put, may change that dynamic somewhat.
Well, has the on that same vein, has the changing dynamic domestically been one of the reasons that you have now a split headquarters, Fort Lauderdale and Greenville or upstate?
It's really a question of finding talent, but also just the fact that we need access to airports that can fly to more places. If we, and that's, yes, Greenville is I'm a great admirer of Greenville, I have to say. It took somebody or a group of people a lot of civic courage to develop Greenville to what it is. And yesterday, I sat down by the river and I listened to one heck of a good band playing for the people of Greenville right on the river. It's just beautiful. So a lot of good things have happened there. The airport is a different issue, right? So it's hard to fly to places. If we have weather, the Greenville airport will be shut down. So that has something to do with that. Also the fact that we have a lot of activity in Latin America. You know, we can find people with those language skills easier in South Florida. So you know, so that really has been the dynamics behind it.
And
but Simpsonville is still the main place.
Well, and I understand. And the broader issue of transportation in South Carolina has been debated very publicly, and not just about the airport in Greenville or Columbia or the expansion of it, but generally the bones, if you will, of transportation in South Carolina are not being funded at the rate either promised or needed. So is that also an issue?
I think it is an issue for South Carolina that the infrastructure isn't put in place. But I think it's an issue for the country in general. I don't think we have enough infrastructure. I don't think we're funding the infrastructure to where we need to fund it. I don't think we're funding education to where we need to fund it. We're competing with people all over the world. And you know, if you look at if I look at my roster or my engineering guys, you have to work on the pronunciation of most of them.
Oh, their name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
Because they all live here. They all got educated here, and then so it's an interesting dynamic, and I think we need to do
Bubba
something.
is not that hard to say, by the way, Per. I say that to Per. Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
Lewis.
one of the things you said, Per, that we think is critically important is your reliance upon the state-funded research. And there's a dynamic out there in the public policy arena where some say the university shouldn't be involved in that. And you as a private corporation indicating that that's a significant reason why Simpsonville is a key place for you is a very important thing that word needs to keep getting out over and over again.
You know, our relationship with the local universities has been built over decades. And it takes a long time to build that kind of relationship where people feel at ease working with one another, right? So I think one of the reasons we still have our main engineering R&D center in the whole company is in Simpson, is because we have built these relationships with universities and in the Carolinas, I should say.
Well, we think this is really a great point about manufacturing in South Carolina in general, that it takes us beyond branch manufacturing. It takes us to the place where the products are being developed and where it really makes for a more stable presence for a company like yours. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say. And also I think, the point that Greenville is actually a nice place to live. It's a nice place to bring up a family. Right. And that helps as well. Because I think, the engineering folks, either the spouse is also in the workforce somehow. And, that's a nice place for people to bring up a family where, both spouses can actually work and make it function for the family.
Robert?
We were talking earlier about conflict minerals and the Dodd-Frank legislation that puts a burden on your organization to make sure you track where you're buying your raw materials from. How's that affected your business, and more importantly, how's it affected your ability to compete globally?
And you have less than a minute.
Okay, I'll go very quick. Dodd-Frank Act actually gave us an opportunity to go back into the Congo, in the DRC. It gave us a playbook. It says, if you follow these rules, your material is by definition conflict-free, according to the law. That gave us an opportunity to have these conversations with companies that otherwise wouldn't buy products that had material coming out of the Congo. Right. So thank you very much, Dodd and Frank, for putting this legislation in place and slipping this Section 1502 into the legislation, which I think many people didn't actually see when the legislation was debated. We took that opportunity. I went to the Congo, found a miner that had a concession on a piece of land in the middle of this is sort of 5 miles north of nowhere, I kid you not. Yeah. We built the mine, and that started the whole process.
Okay, you know what, and that's got to be the last word, but let me tell you, you are one of the few that have actually spoken in support of Dodd-Frank, so thank you for doing that. Come back, please, and let's make sure it's not 9 years later. We'd like to have you back here. Thank you. Nice to see you. You look good. Congratulations. My pleasure. Great financial. Robert, good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Always nice to see you, Mr. Gossett.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, until next week, I'm Chris William. Have a good weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.